if you boil down the whole human dilemma, it all comes back down to trusting love, not just romantic love or love in partnership, but like capital L love, like the universal love. Like, am I loved by life? Am I loved by the universe? Am I safe in this place, in my body, on this planet? Like, am I loved by creation is really the bigger question, right?
Benjamin and Azrya Bequer were the first people that gave me hope that there was a full fuck yes relationship available for me, something where there would be no doubt in my mind. And of course, it came true. So these are my sacred union gurus, and I can't wait to share this conversation with Benjamin and Azrya Bequer and my beautiful wife, Vailana. The truth is that we're all the master, we're all the healer, we're all the mystic.
Give it up one time for Aubrey Marcus.
Benjamin and Azrya Bequer. You guys have been one of the examples that when I met you and you were talking about your union, I was like, wow, that's an interesting anomaly. But I didn't really believe it because I wasn't with Vailana yet. So you said something to me right out of the gate, and I was in a great partnership with Maya, and I was like, I'm pretty stoked about this. I think this could be it. And you said something to me that I'll never, ever forget. You said, well, it's either a full fuck yes or it's not. And I was like, what do you even mean? Is there such a thing as the full fuck yes? Like, what are you even talking about? Like, I didn't think such a thing existed. And then I found it and I was like, oh man, he was telling the truth. And you guys have found that full fuck yes in each other and really guided the way for me to believe it was possible. And I think in this conversation, hopefully so many other people to believe that a full fuck yes in a partnership, like a full one, a blistering full one, is possible. Wow.
They say the hardest no to identify is the one closest to a yes.
Wow. Yeah.
And by they, he means he says that.
He refers to himself in the royal they.
He's just humble. He's like, they over there. But I was like, no, babe, that's your thing.
Yeah, I guess what I'd say to that too is it, looking at that like from an external perspective, what allowed that from my perspective is the work I did, because I also didn't show up in previous relationships the way I needed to for them to show up the way I needed them to. And so you also have to be operating at that full fuck yes level. You have to be an energetic match to that. And I wasn't previously. And so I'm grateful for all those previous relationships that allowed me to see where I wasn't showing up the way I needed to. And then I was an energetic match to Azrya.
When he came in with the full fuck yes before your full fuck yes, right? Like you were like, oh yeah, maybe so. Right? And how was that feeling, that sense of certainty from him first? And then what was your process to get to your full fuck yes?
His certainty was the most exhilarating and most terrifying thing I think I'd ever felt in my body. It was like I'd never been met with that level of unwavering certainty. And I remember someone asked me pretty early on, right when we had met, like, what is like one thing about Benjamin that you would say, if you had to pick one thing to describe like the nature of his love, what would it be? And the answer was instant, unwavering. And I think because of my unique history and a lot of factors related to my childhood, including the absence of my father and a lot of like moving around and very little stability and very little consistency. In other words, a lot of waver. That was a very foreign sensation. And at the same time, it was like what I'd been longing for my whole life. So we talk a lot about, in our work, we talk a lot about everything you didn't know you wanted. Like there's that thing that you didn't know you wanted, but then when it's there, you're like, holy shit, I've been wanting this on some deep subconscious level my whole life. And so it was both the paradox of feeling like this was now being presented to me, but in order to fully receive it, I had to face off with all of my deepest fears around it not being real or possible or not being ready, or the commitment piece, that it was an invitation into a commitment, because that unwavering energy was like, here I am and I know what this is and I choose this fully. It makes no logical sense, but I'm choosing it anyway. It makes no logical sense to know that, within a week of meeting each other, right?
Right.
And with that unwavering energy then comes the invitation to meet it fully. And so what does it do? It illuminates, in my case, it illuminated all of the waver inside of me around like, what do I really want? Who am I really? What do I want the rest of my life to look like? I mean, there was like big questions that I'd never confronted before, because I've been in long, like, monogamous committed relationships, but they ended up being committed because that's just what happened. But they were never like, hey, we are committing to do this together. And certainly, like, the whole forever conversation was very foreign to me. I was like, forever? What? Like, what is that? I don't even know what that is. All I know, I don't even know where I'm going to be, a week from now. I don't know where my rent's coming from next month. Like, I was still very much living in a deep state of uncertainty, which I had made tremendous amount of peace with. And in a lot of ways, that uncertainty was a comfort zone for me. Mm-hmm. And the unknown was a lot safer for me than the known, which is kind of the opposite of a lot of people. It's the other way around. So for me to step into this timeline of like a shared life that is known, and also, as I'm learning, infinitely unknown, because we are such complex, multidimensional beings. There's layers and layers and layers to one human being. You can go infinitely deep into one human being if you're willing to keep pulling back the layers. So the fear of like, oh my God, like, what if this is, I guess there's always been a part of me that's like, I call that, this aspect of myself, the novelty whore. Like the part of me that's like, yep. Okay, I did that and that was really cool. And now I'm on to the next thing, I had to really face off with that part of me. But in this journey of being together and seeing the layers come off, and also Benjamin's willingness to reveal the layers and continue on this path of becoming, really, as we call it, which is a shedding and a transmuting and a constant shape-shifting and revealing of who we truly are. It never gets boring. There's no timeline where it can be boring if you're really committed to that path.
Yeah, that's the deep lesson. I think a lot of the fear is that if you know that novelty works, like novelty works.
Oh yeah.
But it only works to a certain depth, and that's the problem with novelty. It's self-defeating. By its very nature, it's self-defeating. Eventually, something becomes not novel, and so, in the absence of the pathways that can go deeper to create new novelty at new dimensional levels of depth, then it is monotonous and it is boring. So you have to go back to the beginning of just raw novelty rather than the exploration of novelty at a different strata of your understanding of each other.
Yeah.
David Brooks in The Second Mountain talks about commitment in marriage, and he talks about how it's really the ultimate freedom. Because once you fully commit to something, we spend so much of our time and energy searching, right? Especially for a partner. And in the commitment is tremendous freedom, because then you're free. The rest of your awareness and your bandwidth is free to focus on all the other things that you have going on in your life, and you could just commit to it. And so it's also drives a lot of freedom.
Yeah, it's the one choice that shapes all other choices. And he says it in the book, and I highly recommend the book, and even just those particular chapters are so powerful and completely changed my perspective on all of this. But he says, like, if you actually stop and think about it, there is no decision that you will make in your entire life that is more important or more meaningful than who you're going to marry or be with or commit to, in that way, because they will touch every area of your life. There's another great book called Becoming a King, where he uses this example of your spouse is like this beautiful tree that's growing in the middle of the living room. And it's like it's just smack in the middle, and it's amazing, right? It's alive and it's breathing and it's doing things, and you love it. But it's also something you never can go into any room without having to like acknowledge the existence of the tree. Like it's gonna affect every area of your life, every decision you make. It's all a co-creation at that point. And so for me, as a fiercely independent spirit and someone who had created a lot of self-worth and a lot of identification around independence as a necessity from an early age, like I had that, a huge part of me had to die to be able to come into this union.
Yeah.
And when you say the full fuck yes, it's also like what I'm learning is it's the full fuck yes. And so what does full mean? It's like the full spectrum experience of being in something with someone, which is all the light, all the magic, all the juice, and then also all the shadow, all the trauma, all the karmic patterns, all the generational, ancestral stuff that we bring into relationships. No, you know.
What are you talking
Look
about?
at that devious face as those words dance off your
It's all
tongue.
light, baby.
If it was all light, I don't think I'd be sticking around all that long, because the truth is that,
It's boring.
you know, there's a richness in the soil of our shadow that is, yeah, there's a turn on for me there, not just like the part of me that relishes the full spectrum of the human experiences, but also the part of me that likes the danger, you know?
When did you get this tattoo on your neck that says trust love?
I got it 5 days before we got legally married.
Yeah. It seems like it's a message to yourself in all timelines, right? Like
Absolutely.
a big part of this journey is like, how much can Azrya trust love? And that's a journey that you've been on as well, Vi. You know, it's like a journey to trusting love.
Yeah, still learning how to fully, it's like my knowing is in this place that I absolutely do. And my body memory that knows such a different expression of a lot of suffering and pain and trauma and love is like, my body's not totally there yet. I'm still bridging that gap of, you know, my knowing that knows I'm so safe and I'm so free to express myself fully and to know that, you know, like this is the primary commitment. Like our sacred union is above all else that, you know, we experience in our lives. But my body's still learning how to like fully be there.
The body's slower. It's a
Yeah.
lot slower than, the intellectual mind, right? And when you say knowing, we use that word a lot too. We've talked a lot about knowing. Benjamin has this quote, I don't know if it's yours, but the opposite of learning is knowing. But that's talking about like an intellectual knowing, the kind of thing that you learn through, you know, reading books or even personal experience. In our book, we capitalize the whole word knowing to distinguish it from the intellectual knowing. And the knowing you're talking about is like the capitalized version, which is that deep soul remembrance where it's beyond logic, beyond reason, and it's just
A felt sense. Aubrey calls it knowing with a capital G as in gnosis.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's how we almost went with the capital G. And then we were like, don't know how many people know the whole gnosis thing. Might be a little deep end.
But it's interesting to reflect because all of these this patterning that we have and these constructs to protect ourselves in life, like abandonment, you know, all these things, there's a similar strand that's like, I can't fully trust in love. I can't trust in it to hold me, to see me, to support me through those darker paths of going through our shadow. Like how can I actually just have this felt sense of fully trusting in love with all of me? It's like, it's a freaking journey. It's like a lifeline, you know?
I would say it's, if you boil down the whole human dilemma, it all comes back down to trusting love, not just romantic love or love in partnership, but like capital L love, like the universal love. Like, am I loved by life? Am I loved by the universe? Am I safe in this place, in my body, on this planet? Like, am I loved by creation is really the bigger question, right?
And it becomes a subject-object question because it's not the love itself that's untrustworthy. Love is love. Love is love. But do we trust the vehicle from which that love is transmuted? And you know the fallibility of the human being. And we've seen that before, and Vi's seen that so many times. Like, I've given you all of my love, and then you've betrayed me in some way. Or I've been in love with life, and then, you know, a car accident happened, or something happened, or I lost my sibling, or something happened. You're like, I don't trust the love that I have for my life anymore, and so you project that onto it. But it's very interesting, because it's the love love is always trustworthy, but the source from which it comes, which we try to say, this is the source of love, we can have all kinds of doubts about that aspect. And so when she said, you know, in one of our challenging moments, she said, I just don't trust love. And I said, well, it's not that you don't trust love. It's that right now you don't trust me. And so, like,
that distinction is,
and with that, I was, you know, saying, like, is there a part of you that really feels that you don't trust me? And she was like, huh. Let me sit with that. Let me sit with that real quick.
I don't think so, but I guess so. I think, like, for me, that wounding came from childhood, of like, I experienced love, I received love, I knew it existed, but I don't know how to feel safe and in full surrender with it. Yeah.
But just the ability to see that and be able to express that and be able to let that be a part of where you are at in your journey right now, and let that be welcome in the container of this union,
not be triggered,
is in and of itself medicine, right? To be like, hey, here's this part of me that doesn't fully trust you or this, and for him to be in that loving space of like, okay, and let us integrate that part, however long it may take, because the body mind is a lot slower and takes more time. It's that cellular memory, right? It has to be like rewritten, reprogrammed through new experiences, new neural networks.
And it can be, just so that you know, it can be a beautiful experience. Like the remembering, you know, remembering that's happening here has been beautiful. Yeah. You know, hasn't been re-traumatizing. It's just like, okay, here's the safe space for me to remember that I can.
There are precious few stories like the story that we're writing and the story that we're telling. You know, there's all of these fantastical Disney-esque or Hollywood stories about love, and then it gets everybody all hopeful and fired up about it. And then we don't typically see it play out in reality that often. And so it almost makes it, you know, feels like, it's not really that possible. You know, it can't be really that good. And so there's this important thing of, and I think you guys were that for us in many ways, which was, we felt it, but the fact that there was somebody else, like, we wanted to be like, no, I'm telling y'all, I hear you. You're saying it's the honeymoon thing, and just wait a little while. Like, I hear all of that. And like, I don't disagree that based upon everything that you've seen and the disillusionment that you've had with the stories, that you believe that that's the case. But I'm telling you, this is different. You know, I'm telling everybody's like, get a prenup, Bob, you know, just to be sure. I'm like, no, I'm not. You know, like, I'm certain.
She's all happy.
But I was like,
I trust you.
But everybody's like, I know, man. I know everybody's certain. And I'm like, yeah, I get it that everybody's certain, but I'm actually certain.
Yeah. We had a really funny call with his accountants. He was like, they're going to be so pissed I'm not getting a prenup. And we're on the phone with them on speaker, and he's like, I want to introduce you. You know, we're going to get legally married. And they're like, oh, great. So.
Yeah, totally.
Prenup? He's like, nope. They're like, okay.
Voices gets a couple pitch higher. Yeah.
But there aren't a lot of like really healthy models to look to of like, well, that's it. I actually see it and I feel it, and you know, you feel it exuding out of your relationship, and that's so rare. You know, and I think that's why it's been so beautiful deepening our relationship with you guys, because we feel so much that you mirror so much of what our relationship represents to us and to the world, and it's like, you know, this is possible. It is possible to be a full fuck yes. Like,
it's important to have those 4-minute mile, you know, examples out in the world, and so. Thank you. We receive that, and it's reciprocal, right? Because seeing you guys evolve, it's like this, you know, Azrya calls it the slinky effect, where it's like, you know, seeing it reflected in you also allows us to grow. But it's so important, and it's also important within the relationship. Like, we have very different strengths, and so she's been my 4-minute mile analogy, where like I've seen the way she shows up in the world. And I'm like, wow, I didn't know that was possible. I want to feel that and show up in that way, and then vice versa. So
yeah, that felt, we learn so much more from just seeing something and knowing that it's possible. Like, belief is such that powerful force, and to really believe that. And of course there's going to be those people like, oh, look at these still newlyweds talking like they made it, right? And that's fine, and I welcome all of that, skepticism. And if you want, wait your whole life and then you'll be proved wrong. And if that's the way you want to play it, go for it. Or like, trust that we're actually telling you the truth.
yeah.
And either way, you're not guaranteed that you're right, but to trust that, I think, is really interesting. And it's not to force it. And that was also another thing. Like, if it's a force, it's that no that's very close to a yes. If you're like forcing it, it's not a forcing thing. It's a lot more Taoism than stoicism of something. It's more like allowing, like, really let this happen.
And I also think that this whole idea of like this honeymoon phase is this like, I mean, from a scientific perspective, it's all pretty bleak, right? It's like, okay, you're biochemically, evolutionarily going through an incredibly altered state of consciousness. What you're experiencing is really not real. It's just a bunch of chemicals released in your body. And so you're seeing this person through these rose-colored glasses, and like, it's gonna wear off, and then you're gonna be sitting there, being like, holy shit, now I see the real you, and I'm like stuck with you, and now I'm kind of over it, and now I'm gonna go find someone else.
Hey.
This is, I'm telling you, but this is the science. When I've read about it from the scientific lens, I've found it incredibly jaded.
Of course.
And so there's been a real curiosity for me around like, okay, in order for it to run that course, what that means is that we have no say over our biochemistry, right? Our biochemistry is essentially running us, and it's doing its thing, and we're just kind of at the whim of it. I think so much of the journey of self-realization, actualization, mastery is starting to, control is the wrong word, but create a conscious relationship with your nervous system, with your energy body, with how your thought patterns and your physicality and your mannerisms and all these things affect, your biochemistry. And so as you gain mastery over that, you have the capacity to, for example, open your heart, right? Like, that's one simple thing. It's not at all simple, but it sounds simple. To just the ability to track what makes my heart close or contract even just slightly versus what makes it open. And being able to, realize that, okay, yes, in this early stage romance, my heart is blasted open and I'm not really doing anything consciously for that to occur. But if I'm really on the path, then I can learn to open my heart through the power of choice. And in a moment where my heart may want to potentially close, which would create separation in my partnership and over time could create complete separation, I can consciously choose to lean in instead of lean out. I can consciously choose to open instead of close. And I think it's those micro decisions in everyday moments that ultimately determines whether you're in a relationship that is on the timeline of becoming more and more intimate, connected, passionate, alive, or on the timeline of what science would say, which is like, this is fizzling and burning out, and now we're bored, and now we're moving on. And it's like which timeline are you on is entirely determined by the micro decisions you make in every single moment. When, we had a moment the other day where we were on the phone with his doctor, and I was like, giving him a hard time for not chewing his food more fully because whatever, I'm not going to get into the details. It's coming from love, right? I love him so much. I don't want him to like have issues. And he's like, will you just give it a rest? Please, woman. And I was like, triggered. And I like walked away. And then I sat with it and I was like, okay, I could just say I'm sorry and like realize that like, that was unnecessary and I could just keep my heart open. And so I just did that.
Yeah.
And it was just like, it could be that simple, right? Or I could be righteous and be like, no, but I'm right, but you know, blah, 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 blah.
And then your separation goes into sleeping separately and
Exactly.
feeling crappy and into the next, and then you're like start breeding resentment. It's like those
things
micro.
fester.
She's talking
over
just
time.
hypothetically. She's never done that. She's never once done that where she's just left in the middle of a fight or anything like that.
But these things
Not
fester,
innocent.
even the tiny, tiny, tiny little things, right? And so it's like just being able to have that. I mean, ultimately, it's all self-awareness to say, no, I don't choose this. I choose this. I choose the opening.
And I think in our relationship, with one of the things that's really unique, and it's new for me, and really, it's been beautiful to like step into a relationship in a different place. But we've never been in a fight, and we've had the most challenging conversations we could possibly have. We've thought our relationship was, you know, at risk at times, and moves through some really challenging things.
You call them your death portals.
Our death portals.
Yeah. And we went through two, and really not for anything related to like the love between us, but really questioning alignment. But we did it really with open-hearted through all of it, through the most difficult conversation, through hearing the exact opposite thing you want to hear. And so that's been beautiful to experience and to see that you can stay open through the most challenging experiences.
Through like the deep value of truth and being in integrity with yourself. Like we actually just had an instance last night where like for me, what's been so helpful is like just automatically naming where I'm at. Like if something arises and I have a physical, any kind of discomfort in my body, it's like, this is what I'm feeling in my body, and allowing him to see me in it and not giving it any more life to be like sitting on it and letting it stir and, you know, become into a bigger monster. It's just like, this is what I'm feeling, you know, like this feels a little bit threatening to me, or this feels a little bit unsafe. And like, there's like his reflection to me is like, it's so beautiful for you to be able to witness yourself and to name it. And it breeds like such deep intimacy through that, like very just deep expression of truth. You know, even where like prior to this relationship, I probably would have felt embarrassed or like, you know, they're going to reject me if I have anything that's not just like bright and awesome and passive, but like, no, like this is a relationship. Like intimacy comes through that deep level of truth.
And Vi and I have had some fights. You know, we've had some fights. And I remember one of the very first really big ones we had after getting engaged was it's always over something really small. And then it just escalates. And, you know, we've had different challenging relationships, and Vi in particular has had a lot of traumatic relationships, and the coping mechanisms for those come online. And I've certainly had, you know, my own issues as well. And I remember it was really interesting because this blew, like, it got so big, this argument, you know, like so big. And we had to we were taking some space in different sides of the house or something like that. And I really thought about it, and it was like, whoa, like I never would have expected us to go this deep into separation. And there was this like fundamental thing, like, what I feel and what I know is not wrong now. And it was this choice of like, no matter what, no matter what, I choose that I'm in, no matter how many times this happens, no matter what. And there was this real release in that, like you said, the freedom of, no, we're committed no matter what. And this is all in. And when we came together, that's just what I was expressing. I think you were huddled on the driveway somewhere after wandering
in
lost
Sedona,
in your sorrow. And I was we're together forever. Like, so how do we want to, you know, however we want to move through this, we can. And that was a big significant difference, because in every other relationship I'd have been like,
there's an out.
Well, you know, maybe this means that it's not time.
I really like the Jim Dethmer quote, what are you willing to risk for full aliveness? And so he talks about in his relationship with his spouse, that they're in a relationship, and I feel like it resonates for us, and I see it in you guys, that if you're willing to feel uncomfortable, to say I'm uncomfortable, and you're willing to put everything on the table deal with have those uncomfortable conversations and face them head on with openness, then what you get on the other side of that is like full aliveness, and that's a full relationship. And so being willing to say, hey, I feel this, is allowing for that full expression of life.
Yeah. And also the in that expression too, I think the thing that's really important is like the softness and curiosity. Like my body's having this response right now, but I'm also curious, like maybe this is an edge for me, you know, like not like this is my trigger, you have to be this way, but like this is how I'm feeling, and also I'm really curious about it, and how can we work through it together. Yeah.
I mean, there's something like, we definitely didn't hit the ground like fighting elegantly. You know what I mean? Like this is a process for us. Everything in our relationship's been so beautiful, but when it got ugly over some trivial thing, like a race up a hill that I won and joked with her a little too much about, or like,
No way.
or like some other, you know.
It's always like, most of the time I have like we're very sarcastic with each other, and sometimes he can pick up on my sarcasm, but they're actually being a little bit more there. And my own judgment of myself, like how could I hurt the person that I love, sometimes gets me stuck in like, but that's not where it was coming from. So we would just get in these like circular arguments that was just getting, and the arguments aren't like screaming and yelling at each other, but they're just like, it's not going anywhere. Like nothing is happening here.
But there was like a beautiful turning point moment where, in one of these ones that went from triviality to intensity, you know, we were arguing, and I just got absolutely annihilated, like absolutely decimated in this. And I consider myself a fairly good arguer. You know, I feel like I can hold my own, you know. It's like imagining that you're like a good martial artist, and then you just get your ass whipped, like so bad. Like maybe you're a great Taekwondo expert, and then you run into a Gracie and he just is choking you relentlessly and you don't know what's happening.
So did you get turned on?
But what was interesting, so she goes off, and it was a very ridiculous thing. She goes off to her own experience that night with a group of her friends, and I was at home, and we didn't really resolve it, so I couldn't sleep. So I'm up till like, she didn't come home till like 5 in the morning.
I was doing a sound healing on the solstice that went really late.
Yeah.
She's like, I wasn't partying.
Partying with my friends.
He's like 5 in the morning.
Yeah. So, but ultimately, through that time, it was actually really beautiful, because that was the last point where we've ever had something that escalated like that, because I had this understanding that if we get into that, Vi will destroy me. She will absolutely destroy me. And so when she came back, she was like, man, that was awful. And I was like, no, stop. That was awesome. I was like,
it did turn you back.
I was like, that was awesome. That was like, I encountered a force of nature.
Right.
Like I have never been dominated like that before
Colleen.
in my life.
Colleen.
In my life. And there was this kind of like, oh, wow. Like I wasn't, you know, I wasn't castigating her. I wasn't judging her for it. I was like appreciating that level. And since then, like, you know, there's been a couple other things that have come up where I've immediately felt where I could try and hold my ground, but I was like, I know how this ends, and it ends with me getting my ass kicked. So I'm just like, you win, Vi. Like you win. And then she goes, oh, well, I don't want to win. Like I'm not trying to.
It takes the fight out of you.
It takes the fight. Yeah, it just takes that. It takes that energy out. And in that experience too, you know, moving through my own shadow and triggers, like he gave me the permission to really love myself there, and like his acceptance of that energy in me, because I've always had it, that very, you know, like a lot of women have, like people love to paint women as like, you're the crazy woman, like when her boundaries are crossed and then she freaks out. Like I've had that energy, and it's cutting, you know, and it's like my mind for some reason just goes into this red state where it's just like, I know how to get, you know, I know how to say the thing to get it to stop. But his acceptance of it, and in some way this very beautiful reverence for it, like it is, you know, the Kali depiction standing on top of Shiva, like that force of power, and his surrender to it. It's like we haven't had, and it, for one, it helped me to really integrate that energy in myself and be more loving with myself. And not repress that side of me. And also, you know, like his acceptance of that and his surrender, that's kind of just like, you know, I know where this goes. I don't want to win. It helps me to meet, it helps
Well,
me
I
to
can't
be
win.
it
So
helps me.
if I had a chance of winning, it might not have actually worked.
But
We might have been like, all right, you want to lock horns? We'll lock horns. Let's keep going. But when I know that it's like, I'm not going to fight Kyle Kingsbury. Like, he's going to fucking kick my ass.
But it sounds like an empowered surrender, though, because I think
Totally.
there's a big difference between being
there's
like
a choice.
cowering to someone else's raw force of nature, whether
Yeah.
it's, you know, holy fury or whatever, and being like, oh my God, like I'm literally scared of you, which is not at all sexy.
Not healthy. Yeah.
Or being like, whoa, like I respect that. And I'm not going to mess with it. But like I'm empowered in my surrender. And what that really is communicating to you is he can hold all of you.
Yeah.
He can hold even that part of you. He can see it through a lens of reverence. That's a safe place.
Yeah.
It's been beautiful to see you guys lean into like the safety of the relationship, like you just seeing your relationship evolve and how much more comfortable you guys are with each other in that sense. And like that fighting feels like it's going to just dwindle away because
It already is.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, it's like anytime we get there, it's like this, it's like the switch that happens if I mentally go into that space. That's very much a programming, you know. It's also ancestral, like the women in my family. It's like they call it Madame Pele energy. It's like the force of the volcano that's destruction and creation, and that is an aspect that we all have within us. But his surrender to it, it's like it flips the switch back. So I'm thinking more from a compassionate place and like, this is my beloved. Like this is not what I want. I also am no longer shaming myself and repressing it further and rejecting any part of myself. But it's like then
The shame causes you to deny that it's actually happening.
yeah.
Right? Because you don't want to acknowledge that you're not righteous and justified in your action because you're ashamed of that aspect. But when the shame is removed, you can see it and be like, oh, whoa.
Yeah.
well, I'd like to see it. So anytime you want to bring it
Yeah,
out,
it's damn
we'll get
impressive.
some popcorn.
It is the most violent, nonviolent communication you've
That's
ever
what he
heard in
calls
your
it.
life.
That is you're the greatest at violent, non-violent communication.
It's like all the right language so that you can't question the language. It's not like he's just calling me a name or something like, oh, you're going to call me names now? It's like,
And it's not screaming. It's very just like, it's very direct and very like, you know, it kind of emotionless and very dry,
Really?
but it's like very violent, non-violent communication.
And I'll say that in previous relationships, I had that. Like I showed up in that way, and in my last relationship, it would get nasty, and that was coming from a wounded place. And that relationship taught me that that like I didn't like myself. And the further I got, when I ended that relationship, I was very much pointing the finger and like, here's a laundry list of all the things she was doing wrong. And the further I got away from that relationship, the more I looked in the mirror and was like, wait. Like she couldn't show up the way I needed her to because of how I was showing up. And I was really defensive and attacking. And I'd go for I was really good. I was like you, like, I'll take your throat off. You know, you want to argue? Let's go. And then,
Spicy.
you know, over time, and our relationship kind of, you know, snowballed in a negative way because of that. But I think over time with reflection, I really realized I didn't want to show up that way. And and I'm thankful for that relationship because it allowed me to see that within myself and show up differently.
And to take responsibility.
Yeah.
You know, like it's not like he just surrenders. So I'm like, oh, I won and I can move. It's like, no, it actually, instead of going through the cycle of I have this expression that's, you know, very shadowy and reactive, and then I go into shame, because it's like as soon as that happens and I feel the level of hurt that I have created, I am so hard on myself and I hate myself for it. It's like it's a lot of the reason why I've had an avoidant pattern is because I know my capacity to go there, and I don't want to do that because I judge myself so intensely afterwards. So I just leave, you know, which on sometimes it's helpful because I can blow off steam and journal and get clear about what's actually going on for me. Sometimes it's just, you know, it's just a way to get out and escape. But yeah, this just the way that we've related with it. It's just helped me to not go through those cycles, to actually take full responsibility, not shaming and guilting myself through it, but like owning how much I want, you know, for my beloved to feel seen and not, you know, not transgressing this relationship. Like it's really, really helped me a
Another
lot.
code that's for people as we're talking about like navigating conflict, which is super important in relationships, like it's essential, is when she retreats, which is something that she likes to do. I would rather just hash it out until it's hashed out. I'd rather like stick in it, and if it gets stormy or whatever, stick with the storm, and the calm winds will come, right? But she would much prefer to like, let's take some space. And, you know, I have enough sense to not chase her.
Yeah.
Right. And like, if I chase her, then I'm crowding her, and then it's just continuing the whole thing. So just learning like, all right, just hang out, you know,
like he allows me to be where I'm at without judgment. And that, I mean, even that didn't last very long. Like that was a tendency of mine in another partnership. You know, our attachment styles were in conflict. They were very anxious and I was avoidant. So like when I needed to breathe and take space, when I felt like there wasn't communication, and then there was the anxiousness towards me not having space, it just felt like I was literally going to explode. And he gives me the space when I need it, and I take the space. Like I use it very consciously, particularly in our relationship, to like get clear and right with what's happening within me. And you know, the few times that that's happened, I'm journaling, and then it's like, I'm so grateful that he just gave me the space to go through my process and didn't get triggered by it, didn't shame me for it or make me feel guilty that I needed to do it. And then it's like, oh, fuck. Then I go right back and I'm just like, I want to be in love. Like, how can we move through this? But
pendulum swing.
Yeah, it's like, and it's fast and not dramatic. And it's helped me to unwind that very deep patterning of how I've just been, you know, in relationship before. You're so great.
Oh, thanks, babe. What are some lessons from the death portals that you guys have been in, navigating situations where you just didn't know if you could make it work?
Lessons from the death portals, a memoir.
That's a big question.
God, there's a lot of lessons. I think that when everything is fine and dandy, like, that's great. Obviously, we want that, right? We want harmony in relationships. But I think the trust that we've created and cultivated in a fairly short period of time largely came from our willingness to walk through those death portals together, not knowing if we were going to come out the other side as a unit, and really like going into the timelines in which we don't, and fully processing that as much as you can, you know, in a hypothetical situation, but like really going there emotionally and feeling that as if it's really happening. It's almost like, to me, the way I experience it is like there's this alchemical process that happens. It's like a transmutation process where the dross is burned away from like all the things that are not fully in resonance or not fully working, cannot continue to exist in that pressure cooker. So they have to be burned away, fall away, transmuted into something new. And so on the other side, there's a freshness and a newness and an aliveness that has always come online for us, and a deeper trust and a deeper knowing. So even though they were the hardest things, they also, I think, forged us in a way that I'm super grateful for. And I remember distinctly one moment, and it's interesting to see the parallels because Benjamin is a lot more like you, Vi, and
you guys are the
Aubrey
poet.
and I are a lot more alike, which makes sense because of the polarities, right?
Yeah.
In some ways it's the opposite too, though.
Yeah,
Ben is way dirtier than me.
You're just closeted. You're just closeted.
We'll see. Listen to the Layla Martin
Oh
podcast.
my God. Yeah. We did go to the same high school, so maybe that had
That's
to do with our
right.
education.
That's so wild. but anyway, so you know, this in the second death portal, there was a moment where Benjamin really like got to a place of real anger, a place of anger that I've never felt him in before. And I think there was a part of me that was deeply afraid of, like a part of me that knew that was in there, but I'd never seen it like come out. And yeah, based on the situation, it came out, and we had a conversation. He's like you; he needed space, so he left.
I went to your place in Sedona. I went to your ranch in Sedona for 2 weeks.
I'm out of here, which was really hard for me because I'm like you. I'm like, let's work through it now in real time. And so to just be like, no, it's okay. It's healthy for him to take this space. Anyway, he was moving through his own process, but at one point he was fucking pissed, like furious. And he called me in the middle of that, and we had a powerful conversation. And there was, as he was sharing his rage, it was almost like one of my biggest fears I was now fully confronted with, which was like his rage in my face at me for something that I did. And it was like in that moment, there was this peace and this clarity that I felt, because I was like, oh, here it is. And it's almost like I felt the love in the anger. I was like, this is just another expression of his passion and his love for me. It's coming through rage in this moment.
Beautiful perspective.
That's
But
really
like,
beautiful.
I felt the love behind it. And I was like, he wouldn't be so pissed if he didn't love me so fucking
So
much.
yeah.
And so it was interesting because I felt so deeply calm and centered throughout that conversation. And it was like, it increased my clarity and my knowingness of like, oh, I'm all in. Like, we're doing this. Even though I would have assumed that it would do the opposite, that it would make me question or make me be like, see, I told you, I knew this was in here. And I'm like, I can't with this. But it was actually the total opposite effect. So that was an interesting learning from the experience.
I would answer the question by saying we're at a stage in our, evolution that, and we love each other so deeply that as we move through those death portals, we wouldn't allow the other person to compromise. And so we got to a place where it was like, this is your truth and this is my truth. And those two truths don't go on the same path. And so the reason that it went to such a serious place so quickly was we both knew that we wouldn't allow the other person to compromise. And I guess I'll just say it was around a child conversation. And so, I was a no to having more children. And she went from like a maybe when we first met to a certainty. And there was no way she was going to allow me to have a child just because she wants one. And there was no way I was going to allow her not to have a child just because I didn't want to have one. And so we knew,
Like the full fuck yes ethos right there.
well, we knew we had to either separate or meet each other in a new truth. And so her truth needed to shift, or my truth. And when we both need to land there authentically from our own perspective. And we were able to do that. And it was in that full surrender. And like what she was saying earlier, when I went to Sedona, I went and felt like I went to the place and I was like, okay, our relationship's like hypothetically over. I allowed myself to feel that fully. What does that feel like? What does my life look like? And I went into a really dark place for a moment, very consciously. This wasn't like, oh my God, I'm spiraling. I went like, no, let's fucking go there. Like I imagined her with somebody else. I imagined my life, everything we're creating and the becoming platform and all that, like dissipating, right? The book, the documentary, none of that happening. And I allowed myself to feel that so that I could like go to that worst place scenario and say, okay, like I felt that and I'm still good and I'm still whole.
Liberating yourself from the
and
fear
it liberated
of
it. So then when I
possibility.
did, so when we came back together, and both of us really did. And so when we came back to it, it wasn't from a place of like, I'm clinging, right? I don't want this to happen. It was like, I already felt that. I felt that it already happened. Our relationship ended internally. And I processed that and I went through that so that when I came back to it, it wasn't from both of us, it wasn't coming from a needy, clingy energy. It was, or attachment. It was coming from a place of like, no, this is actually coming from a positive, full fuck yes energy.
It's yeah. Go ahead.
No, you can. I was just gonna say we had a very similar death portal right before we got married. It's the one that you were referring to, where we had a very difficult. It was supposed to be like a loving ceremony that ended up being very, very challenging and the most like separate I had ever felt from him, and went so deep into this idea, like, I can't believe I've never even questioned this before. I never questioned if this was the right thing. It was just always a full fuck yes. And in my processing, I had to go through that. Like, if I walk away from this, if this isn't the right thing, who am I on the other side? Very, very similar. And that was the thing that helped me to come back to it, you know, with this different level of love and choice and acceptance. Like, I will be okay. Like, I will be okay. I will live my purpose, all these things, but I choose this, you know. It's like such a similar
There's a lot of like
experience.
new age thinking around, well, don't even think about it because then you're making it into reality. But the reality is if your subconscious is afraid of it and you're thinking about it constantly, you have no opportunity to dispel it.
Well, anything you're resisting,
Yeah.
you persist.
Exactly. So this idea, I think it's this real misnomer about, you know, don't even think about it because then you're calling it into action. Well, if it's something that will affect you, there's some aspect of you that's attracting yourself towards it. And the way to dispel it is to go into it. And it's just like we're all, you know, have a lot of experience in plant medicine journeys. And it's the same thing. Like you try to resist, like ayahuasca wants to take you somewhere and you want to try to hold on to the rails
It's like,
as
you're
on the
gonna go
water
there.
slide. Like there's just going to be more water and it's just going to hurt worse. You're going to go, you know, upside down and, you know, half drowning on your way out there, or you just let it go. And I think another interesting example of that is, you know, Violana's had a lot of betrayal in her relationships, a lot of people cheating on her, lying to her, and all of these things. And the impetus of that, you know, that she's identified in the men was lust, of course, right? Like that's what drove it, and some other things were there. But I remember in ayahuasca, when we were in Soltara, I had a deep ceremony where I could feel that I of course had that lust, the universal capital L lust. But I could tell that there was a part, because of her experiences, that part of me was scary. Just like for you, Benjamin's anger is scary, you know? And so I felt like, wow, like she's scared of this part. And so there's some part of me that doesn't feel seen and doesn't feel fully loved because there's a part of me that she's not willing to look at. So I expressed it then. I was like, you know, I was experiencing my lust and, you know, I really want to show that to you and have you, you know, hold it with me. And she was like, kind of like laughed it off at that point. Like, ha, 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 your lust, how funny, you're a savage, blah, blah, blah. I was like, didn't land. That didn't land. We'll move on. We'll
come back to it.
It'll come back.
But
Bookmark.
But then ultimately, you know, a little bit like just dropping a little bit more and the patience to let that unfurl. But knowing like at some point, if we're going to deepen our union, she has to see the scary part and look at that. And then finally, you know, through a variety of different things that came to surface, she made the conscious choice. Okay, I'm going to fucking look at it. And it sounds like a very similar thing that she had to go through herself.
I wanted to resist it because the knowing in my body of how traumatic, you know, like the story, like the lust of the masculine means I'm not chosen, essentially, you know, when this is, you know, my sacred union, I feel safe for the first time. I really, truly feel chosen. You know, this is beautiful, but there's also this other element that whether I'm facing off with it head on or not, it exists, you know, and it pops up in tiny little trigger moments where, you know, like I might not be tracking it, but it arises and I had to go into it. It's like literally had to, you know, in a ceremony space, was trying to resist it. Like it's just like he was talking about. I don't want to envision him having sex with this person because then I'm going to be creating it and I'm just bargaining and trying to like not go there. And then finally it was like, no, you have to go in there. And it was, you know, envisioning him with this other person and I hated it the whole time, but I didn't die. And then and going into it and
I
really
fucked her so good, you died.
That's dark.
God.
Doesn't happen that way.
But then there was this incredible release of this energy that happened and the music that happened as I was in this that brought me to the realization of the truth of what this is. And it's so far beyond any physical expression, any fear I've ever had. It was like something about going into the fear helped me to realize the full expression of the truth
Yeah.
of what this is. And that was the only, that was the only way that I can, I mean, I'm sure that there's also the physical expression of, that being a potential experience, but like
more challenging way to go about it.
Yeah.
Not necessarily recommended.
But for my own psyche and my own wellness and thriving, I had to go there.
Yeah.
Like I really, really had to.
Well, I got lucky. She gets turned on by the, the thought of me with another woman.
That's a different tangent.
That's a different podcast.
Different podcast. No, but I was going to just say, like, what you're saying really is like, it's the polarity, really. And that's what so much of the medicine work for me is about really understanding and integrating, is like the true polarity that we exist within in this universe, the spectrum of opposites that we exist within. And so it's like the more you face the fear, in direct proportion, the more you can feel the truth of the safety of this love, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the more that we went into the death, the more alive our union became.
Yeah.
And I feel like death I have an interesting relationship with death. In a way, I feel like death is actually present for me all the time. And it is the very thing that makes me appreciate life so much, because I have this almost constant awareness that like nothing is ever fixed or forever, or, there's a constant fluidity to this experience, and to not take anything for granted and be so immersed with what's right in front of me. A huge vehicle for me to be able to do that and live that way is my awareness of death as this constant polarity counterpart to the experience I'm having in this moment. And I think it's part of why I can love so deeply too, because it's like nothing is guaranteed. The moment we think it, even like you can make commitments and you can say vows and you can put a ring on someone's finger, but like there are universal forces that are bigger than us that we cannot control. And so to live with that awareness is both terrifying, but also exhilarating, because it makes the colors brighter. It makes the richness of the moments so much deeper.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult to feel like if when we're going this deep into union, if there's a part that's walled off that you don't feel safe to show, or you don't feel safe to express, and if there's that part of you that's walled off, it becomes glaringly obvious. Like this is really obvious. It's like as you get healthier in your diet and you really clean your diet, like maybe you were able to go eat, Carl's Jr. double Western bacon cheeseburger with the fucking waffle cut fries or whatever, and then you were like, yeah, I feel great. But then you really clean up your diet, and then you eat one of those and you're like, God damn, I feel horrible. This is awful.
The contrast.
It's the contrast. And when you start entering deeper into love, those things that you're hiding, those things that are unsafe, they start to like get louder and louder and louder and become absolutely insufferable.
Relentless.
Yeah, they're relentless.
My dreams are a freaking savage. Like, oh man, I didn't consciously, like none of this is actually happening in my mind, but subconsciously and unconsciously, all the programming, from just years of so many things. Like there's okay, here's this new thing that I'm going to approach with my beloved. But
she was trying to express to me just the other day that she had a really bad dream and she got in a whipping fight with one of my exes. And I was like,
say it was a bad dream.
Can you tell me more?
I didn't
Tell
say
me
it was
more.
a bad dream.
How was this whipping fight? Was it,
Describe
it.
It was actually
Hold on, let me get some lotion.
It was a very healing dream. Like there was just kind of like a having it out experience in the dream. But then there was like this beautiful truth to just like be able to sit down and just be like just talk casually and openly and intimately. It wasn't horrible.
Oh, no. I didn't think it was horrible at all. I thought it was quite...
He's like, tell me more. I'm like, they were like workout bands. Shut up.
It's so interesting how the subconscious processes information and like, I think a lot of time really purges stuff too. And that's a whole rabbit hole in and of itself. But the relentless piece, we use that word a fair amount. We actually almost named our book Relentless Devotion at one point.
We're still thinking of calling the documentary Relentlessly Becoming.
Yeah. And sometimes we say it from a place of like, holy shit, like this is just, it's relentless. Like once you're on the path, and our sister Blue was saying this yesterday, she's like, the Gene Keys talks about how you think you're like, okay, I'm doing the work and I'm using the tools and I'm shedding my trauma and my childhood shit and like my shadows, like everything should get easier, right? But you become so hyper aware that you can't escape yourself anymore, not even the subtlest stuff. So there's this sense of relentlessness where you're like, wow, like, and now I see this part, and now I see this part, and now I see this part. And it's like the fine tuning, right? The polishing of the diamond. In the beginning, it's like this big boulder and you're taking the jackhammer to it. And so there's a lot of reward. And then as you get more refined with your awareness, it's like the tiniest little thing. You can't get away with it anymore.
Yeah.
You just can't get
You're
away
too
with
aware.
it.
Especially when you have a partner that's too aware. The mirror can be relentless too.
Yeah, for sure. For
Sorry,
sure.
babe. Yeah, and that's been something that I've had to really learn too, is because I do see, it's one of my gifts is my ability to see the little blind spots and the little things that are slightly out of alignment or not 100% in presence or whatever. And to really have the discernment to know when it's helpful to reflect that back and when it's helpful to actually not.
Yep. Yep.
To just like
Mm-hmm.
let it be.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really in that inquiry right now where I'm like, Azrya, just walk in the other room, just sit down, take a breath, and just like let it be enough. Like, that you don't have to, because it can fall into the nitpicky fix kind of this whole relentless becoming who we are always designed to be thing is beautiful, and it can get annoying.
Yeah, you need a break once in a while.
And also to recognize, as gifted as we all are, we're fallible.
Of course.
Sometimes we got the wrong read.
Yeah.
No matter what it is. Like, it's
or
not
we're
always
projecting, right?
Yeah,
Sometimes
totally.
I'll do that and I'll be like, oh, I see this thing, I want to reflect it. And let me just take a breath. And then I'll be like, what if I just turn the mirror on myself and like, where is that exact thing showing up in me right now?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, oh, I can see it. It's like right there. Okay, got it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really interesting how that works. It's powerful.
So one of the things that a lot of people might be asking is, all right, I get it. I get a flavor of what this type of union looks like. How the hell do I go out and find it? Right. And I think one of the things that I can identify is you got to put yourself out there in the world to get looks, to like, to encounter people, to like it's almost like the souls are drawn together, but you have to walk the walk to actually put yourself out there, right? To be visible and to meet people and to explore. Like, I had to say yes to Burning Man to run into Vailana in that particular occasion. Maybe another timeline would have come through. Maybe not. Maybe there was a choice that I could have made to not go there that would have stopped. So I think the first step is like just making sure that you're encountering a lot of people in different environments, outside of your comfort zone, places you haven't gone, things you haven't done, groups you haven't hung out with. Because if you're hanging out with the same friends, going to the same thing all the time, and you're like, where's my lasting true love? Where's my full fuck yes? Well, you haven't seen anybody but the same 12 people for like a year. So what are your chances, right? And of course, there's apps and things that are hypothetically possible for all that as well. But then in that moment where there's that, you kind of get that feeling. I think there's a way in which both you and I, Benjamin, we showed up and we're like, okay, like I see this thing and I will not let this pass by like a ship in the night. Like, and I was in a relationship at the time, so I was polyamorous, but nonetheless, it was like, no way will I let Vailana just be like, that was a fun Burning Man, bye. Like, whatever that is, she must be integrated into, a friend, into our life and whatever. And I think you have a very similar story, B, where it's like, you guys met and you were like, okay, like there's a very sacred action that still must be taken. And I think it could be by the man or by the woman, but it is kind of a masculine tendency to like go out and say like, okay, like I'm going to take the sacred action necessary to ensure that this possibility is at least possible.
I think I agree with what you're saying about like allowing yourself to be seen is a critical component, whatever that looks like. And and sometimes it's not necessarily more people, but just even just the way you show up in the space, right? And so there's a courage that's required there that you learn over time. I think for me, I guess the way I relate to that is I was dating a lot of women and finding things I really liked in each of them. And I was like, oh, I really like that. I've never experienced a woman that wasn't jealous, right? Or I've never experienced a woman that I could go full spectrum fun with and like not be judged and like no reining in, like let's go all the way. And so I started experiencing these things, and then I created that experience. But for me, there was this this element of I was chasing, like, and you said, like, you I forget the word you used, but like you kind of got to go out and search. And so I was very much in that like predatory, like I'm looking for something, and I was conquering, right?
Sure.
And I feel like that was very much like a shadow. And so I knew intuitively that until I stopped chasing the shiny object and actually just got really centered, was my woman going to show up? And I just knew it in my soul. And so I had to like stop dating. And as soon as I did it and like really committed, I tried to a bunch of times, not going out with women that were fun, right? Or I enjoyed spending time with. They're beautiful humans, but weren't the one. And until I stopped doing that, was she going to show up? And then when I did, it was like immediately. And then because I think there's an element as guys like us, you have to go through a phase of your life, at least I did, of getting it out of my system.
Sure.
Right. And I did that for a lot of years. And I think that, yeah. And so when I realized, when I got to that place, then I knew what I wanted enough to be able to claim fully and be like, no, this is happening. And I think, whether you're a man or woman or trans or it doesn't matter. There's an alpha and an omega energy, right? And so I think that masculine energy claiming is a safe place for the feminine energy to kind of receive. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of how I related to it. Is I had to actually stop going out and stop doing all the things and just know that she was, I needed to be the energetic match so she could show up in my life, because I wasn't the energetic match. There's no way she could have shown up based on how I was showing up in the world. Yeah.
I think what you're describing is creating the energetic magnetism to your partner, which is absolutely necessary, because I wasn't able to actually, I had a lot of deep feelings for Violana. Felt like I was deeply in love with her, but until I had let that go, and surrendered that, was I a match to her? Yeah. Yeah. So it's that combination of getting yourself energetically in the right place, but putting your feet in different places.
For sure.
Like put your feet in different places, interact with different people. And then when you see that thing, and there's like a little asterisk that God puts in and says like, listen, then at that point, just go. Like go.
And then if you look at what happened right before we met, he moved to Venice specifically to break out of his world and kind of be in like a new community, new humans, different type of connections that he was seeking. He went to a dinner. He met our mutual friend Maria. She invited him to, she invited herself actually to stay at his place. Mm-hmm. And he just kind of said yes, even though he didn't even really know her. And because he made this decision out of his comfort zone to let basically a perfect stranger crash at his house in a new home, in a new community, she was the link that had me show up on his doorstep, very quickly afterwards. So there was a series of decisions that he made that were out of the norm, right? He could have stayed.
That's essential.
Yeah, he could have stayed in the same vortex, in the same comfort zone for his whole life, and we would have never crossed paths.
I think the other thing too is letting it be okay that, like, I think at least as a man, and I'll only speak for myself, like, let it be okay that like there's a period of your life where the one can't show up because you're not ready to settle down. Mm-hmm. And at least for me, there was like, I couldn't have met her a moment earlier because I wasn't ready. And maybe when you met Violana the first time at Burning Man, you weren't
No, wasn't quite ready yet.
And so there's a timing thing. And I think a lot of people, myself included, stay in relationships because there's love there and deep connection. But the timing's not right. And I think that's as important as anything. And if you're not ready, I think giving not feeling guilty about that and being like, I'm just not ready to do that. And I need something different right now. And knowing that in everything, there's a timing to life, right?
That was a big question when we first met was, am I ready to settle down? And my masculine, because I feel fairly androgynous. Like I feel like I flow between the two polarities quite a lot, and I am attracted to women, and I had always been curious about like polyamory and different forms of relating, but never had the opportunity to experience that. And so in my mind, I was gearing up for like this.
And you were coming out of a 10-year relationship.
I was coming out of a 10-year monogamous relationship, and in my mind, I was like, okay, I'm ready to like get out there, taste the rainbow, have all my experiences, and like get it out of my system, my masculine.
I've never heard "taste the rainbow" sound so good.
I wanted to taste that rainbow.
She only got the Cuban ice cream flavor.
Oh man. No, but that was really my mindset when we met, and so that's why it was also such a dramatic, complete reframe for me.
What?
I was like, wait, what? And there was a part of him that genuinely was like, maybe we are meeting at the wrong time. Maybe you actually need to go do those things before we could be a potential. And there was a real concern for him because he saw that he could spot it in me because he had gone through it himself.
Not only that, I had a previous relationship.
Yeah.
The girl just got out of a 10-year relationship and we just jumped into it, and she wasn't ready. And because she wasn't ready, it caused a lot of conflict because she was still grieving the relationship and in it and emotionally attached. And then that felt threatening to me. And so it just caused this awkward dynamic. And so I'd experienced it and I was like, okay, that whole, who's that guy? Wayne Dyer quote, life gives you an exam, and if you don't pass it, it gives you over and over again. I was like, oh, is this universe giving me the same exam that I already failed? I was like, wait, I'm not failing another exam, Yeah. And so I was really like, hey, do you need a minute?
Yeah, and it was pretty serious. I mean, he was like on the cusp of kind of walking away before it even all began. And this is kind of an interesting segue potentially into like the plant medicine conversation, because we wouldn't be where we are today. I really believe that if we didn't have the medicine tools to support us through those moments of red flags and fears and like, holy shit, what are we doing? The medicine has been up until about a year ago when it really dramatically diminished. But in the beginning, like there was a lot of hurdles that we had to overcome internally around like, can we really fully lean into this in the way that
and we were able to move at quantum speeds because of the medicine integration. Yeah, sure. And there was a few ceremonies like early on, the medicine was just like, no, this wants to happen. And
the medicine guided so much of this in the beginning. Yeah. And it was like, I can't imagine where we would be if we didn't have those tools as our allies, which is why we also have such a deep devotion to, sharing our experiences about that, because it's an interesting conversation to have like in union, how can you
use it as a tool,
use these things as a tool. Yeah.
It's interesting. I think there's a lot of people who think of medicines as drugs. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of the people who were early in doing medicines were very careful to frame medicines in a way that we showed like, hey, everybody who thinks these are drugs, they're not drugs. Like we're going to take this like super serious, and this is how super serious it is and how super medicine it is. And it's medicine, right. And I think that was important. And I think that was, but then when you really start to know the medicines and you really start to create this familiarity, you can kind of get this ease with them where it's like, and yes, all the guidelines are important and they're not for everybody, and setting and it's all true. I'm not trying to deny any of those things, but there's this kind of like, they integrate into your life. It's just like a part of the fabric of your existence. And we can say the same thing. Like we wouldn't be, people have often asked me, who would Aubrey Marcus be without plant medicine? I was like, I don't fucking know. I have no idea. That is an impossible question.
Yeah. It's like saying, who would Aubrey Marcus be if he never went to school? Like,
yeah.
never read it and didn't know how to read. Like, right? There's tools that we have, and
Yeah, for sure. And there's this kind of like, it's not that the reverence is lost at all. It's not that there's like no more, but there's this kind of like ease with which we understand how they weave and how these spirits work and how benevolent and how loving they are, and also how challenging they can be. But I think it's beautiful to meet, another couple on the path that has a similar, and in many ways, even more in some aspects, the way that you guys are able to use medicine in a way is more fluid in how you've used a relationship, and also know when it's a sacred no. I mean, we invited you to go down to Costa Rica to drink with my first shaman, and it's like, no, it's a no for now. And there's not a second question. It's not like, come on, guys, come on. Like, we're gonna fucking do that. I love you. I respect that because I know you know.
Yeah.
There's a time and place.
It's a really healthy level of discernment with it.
Yeah.
But she's been really, really powerful and guided us.
When you say she, you mean Aya?
Yeah.
Ayahuasca, yeah.
Aya has been powerful for us and guided us all along the way. And there's also a time and place where it's like, it's a tool. And then, there's an evolution where at some point, and Azrya went through this viscerally, and I feel like I felt this more recently, but she kind of pushes you away and says, now we've given you the tools. Now you get to like
walk the
walk,
be the
and
medicine.
do it. Be the medicine. Yeah. And so also being conscious of that, and then not getting attached or clinging to it or using it as a crutch.
Mm-hmm.
The ayahuasca is a particular one because there's, I think, the people who I think are scared to do ayahuasca, and they're like, that's not even how you're supposed to do ayahuasca. It's supposed to be the shaman who drinks the ayahuasca and then nobody else does it. And it's like, all right, well, that was one way that it happened, but there's many, many ways where that was not the way. And, and then there's ideas around dieta, and obviously the Shipibo have their tradition and they have their reasons for the tradition. And, I'm not questioning that. And when we go drink with Shipibo shamans, we follow the dieta pretty much to really respect and honor their tradition, but we started working with a Brazilian shaman who was trained in the Brazilian way. And in his way, he comes out after the first day. And so we got on, kind of a modified dieta, not as strict as Shipibo, but he comes out after our first ceremony. And this was, recently. And he goes, the best thing after ayahuasca? He goes, cheesecake. Love cheesecake after ayahuasca.
Wow, that's breaking every rule.
Fucking cheesecake?
Yeah.
Like, you're my dude, And he's been serving medicine for decades, but his relationship with it has created this flexibility and this idea that, ayahuasca is going to come punish you like an angry pagan god that's going to come bring her wrath upon you. No, he eats his cheesecake and loves it's very interesting. There's no right way. There's just good guidelines, but everything is fluid.
And I think the key is getting really in touch with yourself to be able to just like close your eyes and tune in and like, what's my truth, and like knowing what that is. And that's the work of this path, is just knowing what your truth is in any given moment. And Azrya and I have experimented, with plant-based medicines and had solo sits with Aya and just the two of us, and had really, profound experiences that are way out of the guidelines. But we were in integrity with ourselves.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, I think that's the key is really being in integrity with your truest truth.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And just being able to tune into yourself enough where you can have that level of discernment. That was like a huge piece for me. And I tend to be very rigid with guidelines and just very, like it's that I'm like the good girl. And more recently it was a daily practice, like what feels right to me, like what truly feels right to me. Am I just following something like because somebody's saying it, or does this actually feel true to me? And really owning my own level of discernment and intuition and tuning in with what I need.
When I think back on the time when the whole world of plant medicines and particularly ayahuasca kind of opened up for me, I think I see the value of having the strictness of the guidelines be enforced because there's no context for most humans, and certainly not where I was at, around how to have a reverential relationship with the spirit of anything, let alone a plant. You know what I mean? Like the idea that there's this consciousness that inhabits this plant that I'm now going to commune with, like that to us is now so normalized that yes, we can have a lot more freedom with how we play in those arenas. But I think remembering back to the time when that was such a foreign concept.
Yeah.
And so there was such a power in being like, here's really strict rules and you need to follow them. And if you don't, like, there's going to be consequences. There was actually real medicine in that because it completely changed my relationship to food and nutrition. It made me realize just how much junk was actually in my diet without me even being aware of it. So it was the elimination of all of that to prepare properly that really gave me that awareness, which was a gift. And now when when we're like, oh, it's time to prepare for medicine work, we're like barely tweaking our diet because our diet is essentially already that, you know? I mean, other than like salt, but like really we're eating very close to that already because of the cleanliness of what we eat and the lack of alcohol and caffeine and all these things. Although recently he's back on the coffee train, but and there's a time and place for everything. But I think that there's a time and a place where those things are really valuable. And I agree. I think as the relationship cultivates with these plant teachers, as we start to come into real communion, it's just like when you go to someone's house first, you're like, okay, like I want to be like respectful of the space. And then at some point you're like homies and you're like, oh, can I, throw my dirty laundry in the thing real quick? And like, we're good. Right. So there's like a little bit of a different energy that comes through the familiarity, but it's good for our Western culture.
Saying you get to be homies with Aya?
Yeah. I mean, we are homies, and sometimes she gives me she's a little slap in the face. And sometimes even after all of these years and all of this experience that I have with the medicine, which to most people would be a lot, right? Compared to like a shaman's path, it's a drop in the bucket. But even after all of that, like I've also made mistakes. Like I've had ceremonies where I didn't show up with the right energy, or I took it for granted, even just subtly. And I really felt the consequences. I got my ass handed to me, or I drank even though I wasn't a full fuck yes, but I was attached to some idea of what it should be. And I was like, whatever. Man, that does not go over well.
Yeah.
So I think, it's good to have the ease and as long as you can keep the reverence.
It's almost
intact.
like you have to earn it.
You have to earn it
through your relationship,
and
through
commitment.
your knowing.
And like your devotion. That's literally what dieta is. It's devotion to the reverence and honoring of the medicine. Yeah.
And you don't know where the line is until you cross it sometimes, right?
I remember a time, and also to say, like some lines are firm. Like nobody says, it's after good ayahuasca is some Prozac.
Right. That's a firm line.
That's a hard no.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of things that are actually hard no's like that. And, some things that are really good, make good sense. Like if you take a big mushroom dose, don't drink a bunch of water. You're going to get super nauseous. Right. They're hydrophobic, right? Like certain things that are very pragmatic in that regard. And sometimes though, it's more psychological. Yeah. And I remember there was a time where I was taking mushrooms a lot when I would go out to nightclubs, because I'd like to like dance and I would drink on them and I would like have some drinks and some mushrooms. And this one day I was out at my nightclub that I went to a lot in Austin, and I was going to the bathroom and the spirit of mushrooms comes through and it just says, take a knee. And I go, no, I'm in a bathroom. Like, no, like, no. And it's like, take a knee. Wow. I was like, no. And it just kept going. It was like, take a knee. And I was like, fuck, all right. So I'm like kneeling on the dirty ass bathroom.
I'm sure the guys in the bathroom were excited about that.
So
zipping. I went one knee. I went two knees would have been real aggressive. If mushrooms was like two knees, I'm like, you're fucking I'm drawing the line here, mushrooms.
God, dirty.
But it was this interesting moment and that's a very unusual experience. Mushrooms talking to me. Usually I get ideas and things, but it was like a clear conversation. And it was like, you like treat me with respect. Like I want you to listen to this. Like you treat me with respect. And I was like, all right, I get it. It's like, my bad.
Yeah.
You know, because I wasn't asking, I wasn't saying thank you mushrooms. Like, you know, like I wasn't setting, I was just like, yeah, gobble this and wash it down with some 1942. Let's go.
Right.
You know, so, and there was this really powerful moment. I actually had to repair my relationships with mushrooms at Burning Man that year, where I was like, went to the temple and was like, all right, I'm going to take my first mushrooms. We're going to have a conversation. And we like hashed it out. But yeah, it's very interesting. That's one of those moments where it was just like a check. Like, hey, like, check yourself. Don't play this too loose just because you've been doing mushrooms for 20 years. Like, don't lose sight of the fact, like, we're here as a powerful force.
And I think it's also important to highlight that you have to have the reverence for it, and it's okay to use it in a recreational way. And
if that's the intention,
and it's done in a pure way, and that's as much medicine as anything, right? Is I think a lot of times in conscious community, it gets so serious, and it's like, no, we get to fucking live, you know,
and play.
The
medicine of play, which psychedelics can facilitate beautifully, is like crucial for the healing journey. And I know that, I think we're all pretty, we know how to play, but we also are generally more like serious, committed types. We're like, we're going all in and we're building all the things. And, you know, there's a fair amount of serious energy, certainly in our dynamic. We have to consciously choose the play timeline sometimes.
Yeah.
So
that's some of the most healing times I've ever had,
right?
You know, and it's just like many of the best experiences of my life have been mushroom journeys where there was just absolute hilarity. Sometimes skiing, sometimes with the homies, sometimes in different situations. Her birthday, not this last year, but the year before. But even this past year, we had some mushrooms on. We were just howling with laughter with our friend Aaron. We won't tell that story, but nonetheless, like those moments, there's something so powerfully healing about that laughter.
So healing. I tend to be more serious, and so it's been really powerful. Yeah, and you know, you got to just like with this serious ceremony work like Aya, you also in the recreational side, like you have to tune in and like, am I ready for this? Is this good for me? And like really tune in with your higher self.
Yeah,
because that can go sideways too.
Yeah, I remember one particular journey. For whatever reason, it was a full moon, super triple moon. It was a bunch of men out in Sedona, and we all dropped in with some mushrooms, and we all took what we thought was a reasonable dose.
Don't tell me you got on your knees again.
Oh my God.
That's how all men's groups
When you laugh, you know it's good.
Is that how they do it in Austin?
I'm inviting you now. It's my formal invitation. But there was one brother there who really was into like the seriousness, like this is like sacred silence and blah blah blah, but you could not hold the container at all. It was just like, it was mayhem, and the only thing to surrender to was the mayhem of the situation, of just the absolute hilarity that this is so much that none of us can handle it, and nobody can hold space. The maestros there can't hold space. Nobody can hold space. We just have to allow the entire container of laughter to hold. But he was fucking fighting it, and he was like holding it together, and we're all coming out of it. And he just stayed fighting in his repose, like, and trying to like put on different music that was serious, you know, and like Ram Dass talking or something like that. And it just added to the hilarity of the situation. And then finally, he was real serious, had a, tough journey. And then something clicked, and he just went outside and he started howling with laughter, howling with laughter. And that was this release of like this finally holding the seriousness. Well, then he just let it all go. And it was just one of the most cathartic experiences.
I mean, laughter is so medicine.
Yeah.
Good laughter, good sex. Do some stuff in between.
Oh my God.
That's what I have to say. Well, you guys have a bunch of cool stuff that's emergent, that's going to come together. It's not only the love that you guys have brought together, it's not only the self-work that you brought together, but you're birthing a lot of, different things. What's some of that's coming up that people can keep an eye out for?
Yeah, we call it the hidden years. You've been in a deep dive the last couple of years, creating, all kinds of content and preparing. And so it's fun to actually be on the verge of sharing with the world. But yeah, we're going to launch our platform It's the Becoming platform with a Q, BEQOMING, becoming.me. And we're finishing our book that should be published probably in January or February, and filmed a documentary that'll be released hopefully next year. And so we've been super busy. I don't know if
Very
you want to share any
emotional.
more about the platform.
Yeah, well, the Q, we chose that very intentionally. Obviously, our last name, that's kind of the obvious connection with the Becker, but the Q is really kind of a powerful letter in the sense that it has the feminine and the masculine. So you have the Q without the tail is that feminine womb, infinite circle of life, and then the tail injects that masculine, like linear stability into it. And so because so much of our work is about the integration of polarity and opposites, and so much of what we are energetically is the dance between the alpha and the omega, or the masculine and the feminine. We felt that really captured it. And then also the Q stands for questions, because ultimately that's
where it starts.
There is no becoming path, no quest to self-discovery without the willingness to relentlessly ask questions and ask why, and dig deeper and deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole of what truth really is. And then EQ, emotional intelligence, big part of what we do. So really the platform, it's more than a platform. It's kind of, it's like this
ecosystem.
Yeah, it's like this ecosystem that's birthing through us, and it's vast, and it's multidimensional, and it's really a blend of personal transformation tools and content, media as medicine, which is, taking many of the codes that we learn from the actual plant medicines and infusing them into digital content. But then also that married with like conscious artists and thought leaders and just all the fascinating, beautiful humans that we are blessed enough to receive in our field. Like, how can we empower them to share their message, their voice? So it's kind of like an incubator for them to develop and expand and amplify what they have to share, because medicine comes in many forms, right? We talked a lot about the plants today, but not everyone is going to work with plant medicine, nor should they.
Yeah.
In fact, perhaps a much smaller percentage of the population should actually be ingesting these things than we even realize, for so many reasons. And so what I've been learning from ayahuasca in particular is that there are specific people who are kind of like almost encoded to receive blueprints from the medicines directly. And the medicines are what? They're messengers of earth consciousness, right? I mean, they're a vehicle with which Gaia, the consciousness of the earth, can communicate with us. It's like an umbilical cord, tapping us back into that ancient intelligence. And so there's, from my experience, direct experience, there's these blueprints for how do we actually birth a new paradigm? How do we actually co-create and imagineer this new world that we all know is possible? As Charles Eisenstein said, the more beautiful world we know in our hearts is possible. There's got to be like a blueprint for that. Just like any building you want to put up, you have the architect drop a blueprint, and it's the same thing with this. And so a lot of the blueprints that are coming through are related to how media, whether it be music or film or poetry or, books, podcasts, how can these things be the medicine? How can the frequency of these transmissions deliver medicine into the hearts and the minds of the masses, of the public, of the people who are not necessarily going to be working with the psychedelics or the plants themselves? And so that's been a real deep mission, soul mission for both of us. And we're starting to really like lock in on how that wants to look and how that wants to be shared. So we're very much in the crowning process of our birth.
Yeah.
And it feels it's so crazy. Like I was just right before this podcast, we were pulling up business plans, or kind of like diagrams we had drawn right before we met of this. Like we were both already receiving this before we even met. And then when we met, we put the puzzle pieces together, and it was like, holy shit, we couldn't be more aligned with our purpose. And we have, between the two of us, the full spectrum of all the tools and all the skill sets that we need to actually make this happen. So it's been just kind of awe-inspiring to watch it all come to life.
Yeah. Yeah, we really hope to build a platform for, masters in different fields to be able to showcase. And, everything we're doing is none of it is to, enrich ourselves or put money in our pocket. It's we're going to operate the whole platform on a free will investment model. So people pay what they want for to support the platform, and if they choose not to, then that's beautiful, and we'll trust that it'll all come full circle in another way.
Yeah.
Mm. Well, I can't wait to see it birth. It's been such a pleasure to get to know you as a couple and get to know you as individuals. I can point to many, absolutely beautiful moments in this relatively young, chronologically, friendship, which feels like it spans many, many lifetimes. So it's an honor to walk the path with both of you.
Likewise.
Yeah, indeed.
Love you so much.
I love you too.
many more adventures.
And thank you. I got this for my birthday.
Oh,
Which I've worn, I think, on every podcast I've done since I wear it almost every single day. This was a gift from them that symbolizes their love and their community.
It's a deep fidget craving. The deepest.
Yeah.
I feel so honored to wear it.
Drop your Instagram handle, so if people want to follow you individually, they can follow you as well.
Well, it's at Becoming with a Q. That's our shared platform for Instagram. And then I'm at iAzrya, like iPhone, but then Azrya spelled Azrya. And
I'm at Benjamin_Bequer, and the last name is Bequer.
Beautiful. Love you guys.
Love you. So
Love you guys.
Thank you.
I love you too, Ryan. Thanks for tuning into this video. Make sure you hit subscribe. Follow me at Aubrey Marcus. Check out the Aubrey Marcus podcast, available everywhere. And leave a comment. Let me know if this video resonated or what else you would like to hear from me in the future. Thank you so much.